Welcome to AI Masters Voice, the podcast where we connect minds to dive into the future of AI. I'm your host, Martin Jacob, founder of AI Masters Agency, and today we are exploring a hot topic which changed the legal AI landscape in Europe and around the world. In this episode, we will discussing the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act and its influence for AI developers, creative businesses, and the end users across Europe. And today, I am with Eglė Markevičiūtė, who currently manages the digital innovation policy at the Consumer Choice Center. Eglė used to be the Deputy Minister of Lithuania in the Ministry of Economy and Innovations. And last week, she was accepted into the Stern Leadership Academy by Stanford University. Congratulations, Eglė.
And thank you so much.
It's great to have you with us. And can you explain to our audience in simple words, what do you do and how you're related to artificial intelligence field?
Thank you so much for a very kind introduction. The most difficult answers come after the most simple questions. I'm a public affairs professional. I work as a head of digital and innovation policies at the US-based policy advocacy group, Consumer Choice Center. As you rightly said, I also spent 3 years working on digital and innovation policies at the Ministry of Economy and Innovation of Lithuania, where I have a couple of significant reforms in my pocket, including innovation reform, cloud reform, Lithuanian data embassy. So I'm a public affairs person. I've been near politics throughout my life, and I'm fascinated by technology and innovation. And as a person who has seen policies from up close in both public sector and private sector, I do know how impactful they are for the development of technology.
Thank you, Eglė. It will be really great to hear more about everything. And also we have Rokas Janauskas with us, a respected lawyer and founder of Janauskas Law Office. He's skilled in legal matters like court cases, public buying, contracts, and creative rights, especially in IT, entertainment, and films. Rokas also teaches the future lawyers. Thanks for joining us on the AI Masters Voice podcast, Rokas. Could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about your relations with AI in your daily routine?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Martin, for such a lovely introduction. I work now as a lawyer. I'm the founder of my small boutique law firm. We mainly focus on the diverse client base, from large IT companies working globally to smaller businesses, startups. I work quite a lot with entertainment, film sector, work with Lithuanian producers, animation producers, game developers. And throughout my career, I was working in multinational companies here in Lithuania, which were later acquired by US companies, also in bigger law firms. And now I focus more on my own private practice. And about my relationship to AI, I would say it's close to zero, I would say, with no relationship. I'm a bit old school in my work.
You mean your personal relationship, yeah? But in your work, maybe it's...
I wanted to come to that. Yeah, in my personal work, I work mostly with our tools, translator, if that can count as AI, but from client's perspective, of course, I work because I have now quite a lot of questions in this regard from creative industry, mainly about who owns the rights of AI products, also about developers of AI solutions for themselves and for clients, to spread more about why I'm not a bit having myself in my practice using AI. Maybe it's a bit things with some language barrier. At the moment, I don't see that there are solutions which could catch Lithuanian nuances in laws and legal environments. So maybe someone from the community could after contact me and change my opinion. Maybe it's my just wrong assumption that at the moment, at least ChatGPT, I found that it tends to make things up. Then with some questions, it provides you answers which are not necessarily facts and true. For example, there are also some funny stories that ChatGPT provides case law which does not exist, but for some time it persuades you that no, it's true. Without this like certain liability in the lawyer's dedicated tools, I would not, at least the moment, more trust myself, my own opinion or human's opinion. And also, maybe it's a bit question of my personal way, not following trends, not that much into blockchain, Bitcoin, NFT, and now AI trends. But from legal and working perspective, I was like also very much into it because clients are catching those trends, trying to develop things. So I had to work with these technology issues. So my personal perspective and the way which I work as from client perspective.
Okay, thank you, Rokas. It will be really interesting to talk about, and especially those examples like in some court cases, one of the lawyers prepared documents and it was prepared only with ChatGPT. He didn't check it. And I know it happens in US, I think, half a year ago. So it was a little bit interesting case when lawyers trusted the technology fully and they went to the court. Okay, now I would like to discuss how EU AI Act will impact you and your personal work. And Agle, could you share your thoughts on how this might impact your work at Consumers Choice Center and maybe its broader impact for consumers and innovative companies in Europe and outside?
Disclaimer, it's my personal opinion, and
Yes.
certainly it might be a little subjective. I think the AI Act, as most of the things in the world or life, is a two-sided coin. On one hand, in my opinion, the biggest pro of the EU AI Act is ensuring that when using AI systems, companies, workplaces have to comply with privacy and data protection regulation. This is important. This is a European approach. It might be questionable in other parts of the world, but personally, I like that, and I think that is the biggest plus of EU's AI Act. When it comes to minuses or cons, there are some as well. And as a consumer, I'm interested in a thriving economy and market in the EU that is able to compete with other parts of the world, meaning that both startups, SMEs, and bigger companies have the regulatory certainty, regulatory space, and certain tolerance for risks when developing their products. And it's a huge debate whether the EU AI Act will allow it or not.
All right. And how about your work personally? Will it impact you somehow in Consumer Choice Center or?
Well, this is a very difficult question. Of course, I'm a consumer as well. It is too early to say whether the EU's market will be impacted and what happens after 2 years when the EU Act comes into force, whether we will have products that are less functional, have less features than in other parts of the world. I do use AI products, and I think even Microsoft Office and Word itself has integrated AI systems and products for a long time now. But I do agree with the notion that you have to still use your critical mind to evaluate whether the information provided for you is the right. I also really like the comment about Lithuanian language. I used to work at the Ministry of Economy and Innovation, and one of the big and most difficult projects was ensuring that language models, or in Lithuanian we call it Lietuvių kalbos ištekliai, are created and digitalized so that the AI systems can speak in Lithuanian, if you will. At the moment, we still don't have functionalities in Lithuanian in products like notes, iPhone, dictation, microphones, and so on and so forth. So this is certainly a limitation for a Lithuanian speaker to use AI systems in the future.
By the way, talking about Lithuanian language, there is a one AI open source project. It's called Aya project, and Lithuanian language is included into one of 126 languages, and basically other models will be able to use that model too. I believe this year we will start seeing much more improvement using different languages with AI.
Wonderful. Maybe the state will not need to invest so much money in.
It's open source project, so I believe that people behind it are really keen to implement the new technologies and new languages into it. And Rokas, how about you? How do you see EU AI Act affecting your practice, particularly in intellectual property, maybe film industry, and in general with the contract law?
I would probably need to also to look like from two sides. One side from my personal, like from my practice view, and another side from like clients' perspectives. In some cases where we would interact. So at first, of course, obvious thing that it would be some work for clients and for myself to assist them to comply with the EU AI Act, and the incentive for doing this is pretty much clear, straightforward, because the new Act foresees quite big fines for non-compliance, ranging from 35 millions or 7% global turnover to 7.5 millions or 1% of turnover. This incentive to comply is not something like we will not comply and then we will have some warning or small administrative fine and we can continue. So it's like major incentive to really comply, and probably companies which are now already reviewing the proposals and will be waiting for the final text. Probably at the moment it's a bit early to speak what exactly we can start doing now. Main principles are agreed and we are still waiting for the final act wording, which will be approved by Parliament and Council. So still some changes are possible, but after the law is adopted, there will be some transition period of 2 years to implement. And during that year, I think it will be busy. I would even imagine some cases similar as with GDPR, where like companies had this also incentive of big fines to start implementing. So we started preparing and everyone did a great job to comply. Yeah, so from my personal view, what relates to copyright, to IP rights, the Act also foresees that one of the principles that companies will need to comply with EU copyright regulation and to...
You have in mind the large language models training. Usually these companies are quite big.
With data images, which generates data images, for example, maybe the video images where you need to put some content of others into the training model. I'm talking about those.
Right. Before going deep into this, Egle, I would like to ask you, and maybe you can explain to me and listeners to understand how this EU AI Act was passed, what institutions were involved in crafting it, and when did it start? Because from the headlines in the news portals, we think at least it looks like it was passed in 48 hours, but I believe it's not true. So can you tell me more about this?
Absolutely. So the three main institutions that were working on the AI Act is the executive branch, European Commission, that is the main owner. They drafted it. AI Act is part of the bigger digital strategy. We have to admit that this European Commission was very effective or proactive in terms of technological regulation. There are a number of other acts and regulations that are either came into force or are coming into force in the future. Then there's the Council of European Union, which is comprised of member states representatives, and of course the European Parliament. If we looked at the debate between the European Commission, Council of the European Union, and the European Parliament, I would say the European Parliament was even stricter in terms of data protection when it comes to AI Act compared to the Council of the European Union and the European Commission. For example, the Council of the European Union and many member states were really against not allowing military and national security organizations using AI systems that work with biometrics. This has been stated by our criminal police, for example, criminal police bureau, which did not result in the support at the European Parliament. The European Parliament wanted to ban biometric AI system use completely, meaning that they were the most conservative or the stricter ones. So the main organization, the main institution, the main owner is the European Commission, and others are participating. It started in 2021, but I would say that it reaches even back further in 2019 when the European Commission came into force. This term, the European Commission was appointed, and they had many new ideas how to govern and regulate digital markets, data, how to promote European digital sovereignty, if you will, and AI Act was part of it.
Maybe you can discuss some main purposes of this act. What are the main points what were agreed on?
The main purpose, as I said before, AI Act is part of a broader European digital strategy, and its main aim is to regulate the use, and as we've seen in the last document, also the creation of AI systems and AI tools in the European Union, ensuring that the regulation is risk-based. And as the European officials themselves have proclaimed many times, that it's human-centric, meaning that the citizen, the people are protected from the perceived dangers of AI in the future.
What do you think European Union and Commission and Parliament and all these institutions are mostly afraid of? What's the worst scenario they are seeing? What AI can cause to humanity, let's say?
I'll try to be politically correct. It's, technological Luddites, if you will, or seeing the dystopian, the worst case scenarios. This narrative has been very prevalent over the past few years. And of course, this affects regulators, policymakers as well. The European Union, following their GDPR success or attempts, they wanted to introduce the same type of regulation that ensures the safety of European citizens and Europe as a whole by implementing this type of regulation. That's, I think, their main motto, combined with other initiatives, Data Act, Data Governance Act, DSA, DMA, and other initiatives oriented towards European digital sovereignty. This is just a part of a bigger picture to ensure humans are safe. I think Ronald Reagan was the one who made the famous joke, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," being the scariest words that a person can hear. So not throwing it at the European Commission, but the European Commission and Europe wants to regulate and ensure that people are safe in the future.
From my perspective, I would like to add who we are regulating, technology or people who uses technology. What do you think?
Initial purpose, and this was stated by, I think, the CEO of Mistral, the French startup that opposed EU's AI Act. The initial idea was to regulate the applications so that the applications are safe to use for the consumer. But as it often is, the appetite grows as you're eating, and the European Commission and the architects of the EU Act went deeper into the regulation of technology. Of course, there are opinions that providing the data on the models, the information, data sets that the startup or a company is using to train their AI systems is not exactly regulating the technology, but I wouldn't call it any other way than just going into the kitchen, deeply into the inner works of the companies. I also see a huge debate or discussion on how will that affect the European startup and tech companies' future? Innovation not only needs talent, finances, but which European Union has, but also good regulatory environment, tolerance for risk, and also IP protection. So if we're going completely into the open source area, how will that affect our competitiveness in terms of global?
Thank you. And, this is the discussion for all of us. What do you think, Rokas, you mentioned and Eglė, you mentioned this act will take the force only in 2026, in 2 years. What do you think the time frame? Are there the risk what EU AI Act will be outdated at that moment, especially knowing how fast AI development is progressing? What do you think? Rokas, maybe you can.
From things I see that during my practice, I would say that law is always dragging behind the technology. So it's very difficult for laws to outrun the technology. I think we tried, so it might work, but not like in most cases, because in my view, AI affects so many areas in so many different sectors, and it can be used basically in every sector, in every aspect. IP protection, which is in a way now also unregulated or unharmonized. Lots of questions are still open and discussed now and being decided now. We still maybe don't know the full applications where AI can be possible. So I think such risk exists that it will be outdated, but of course it can be updated, amended to reflect. But like from my experience, as I see with technology, so law, in most cases, it goes a bit after the process, and at first some technology and then decisions how to regulate. It's my opinion.
And Egle, how you see it?
I see it from a philosophical point of view. I see it as a huge flaw of continental law type in comparison to common law, for example. If we compare the UK's approach, the US approach, Singapore's approach, they are not running towards imperative rules or regulations that get outdated very quickly. They work on working with agreements, recommendations for technological companies, for the ecosystem. They try to understand the technology themselves. Only then they think what kind of regulation can be put into practice. We don't know yet. 2 years, Martin, you're hailing from a startup scene yourself. You know it better than we do. Everything can change in 2 years. Some startups can scale, exit, leave to the US, finish. There will be a lot of existential questions for startups and SMEs, especially in Europe, because the compliance costs. My colleague has to be happy about EU's AI Act. This will result in more billable hours and more work because more companies will need the help from lawyers in order to understand the regulation and comply with it correctly. But in general, when it comes to this regulatory framework, I certainly think this may result in being outdated in 2 years. We have to know that the 2 years or the end of 2025 or to 2026, this is yet to be agreed with. So we will see the resumed conversation on EU's AI Act next week. Hopefully it will result in final decisions, and then we'll have to go back to the European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, all the bureaucratic chain in order to finalize the agreement on EU's AI.
All right. When you said startups are moving really fast, and can you imagine what ChatGPT arrived to the public only 1 year ago, basically almost 13 months ago? What will happen in the 2 years? It's really hard to predict, and startups coming, going out, and we're building different solutions. And I believe a lot of teams are building at the moment new solutions. Just last year, when I started checking how many AI solutions we have, in some databases, I saw more than 8,000 AI solutions already. They didn't exist 2 years ago or a year ago. I worked with some startups who were in AI industry 2 years ago, but it was more about far future. Even they didn't expect what will happen in the next year. It will be really interesting to see how the landscape will change until 2026. And another question, and you mentioned what they kind of coming up with the final draw. Maybe it's already accessible, because I tried to find that document and it was really hard to find the newest version of it. I found just half-year-old one.
I think there's newer one available on the EU's legal acts system, EURLEX, but the newest version, in my opinion, it's still not publicly available. There are European officials sharing some information on LinkedIn and other areas, but it's not openly discussed yet.
For our viewers, I will put the link when it will be available publicly below the video. If you don't see the link yet, please refresh after some time. The link will be there. This is the question I believe, for all of us. How do you think EU AI Act might affect innovations in Europe? As you said, the Macron and other politician leaders already said what they think it will lower competitiveness of Europe. Egle, what do you think from your side?
As we discussed before, innovation requires a lot of elements. We need good science. We need business and science cooperation. We need talent. We need finances. We need regulatory certainty. We need collaborative regulators, policymakers. We need clear intellectual property protection and so on and so forth. Commissioner Breton has said himself that innovators need regulatory certainty and that the EU's AI Act will bring a regulatory certainty for them. I am not exactly sure about it because, as we've discussed before, 2 years is a long time where many things can happen. Many companies, including smaller ones, will be more aware of the compliance costs that come with the EU's AI Act. There could be a significant impact on tech talent in the EU not even try to start their companies in the European Union. This may sound a little bit negative, but there are a lot of countries in the world who want to become AI hubs. The UK, the US, Israel, UAE, China, and so on and so forth, Singapore. So there are a lot of countries competing for it. And those who have smaller populations, smaller markets, still focus on regulatory environment that is much more open than the European, increasing their competitive advantage.
From my point, I see it as, let's say, negative side, especially we as AI developers and custom solution developers, we will be using different models. And if we decide what European market requires more regulations, we need to adapt the product to regulations. It means more legal costs to us to enter the European market. Because, for example, my entity established in UK, I have different approach, and the world is much bigger than just Europe. And I believe some of the technologies and innovations after 2 years. Maybe right now they will be entering the market, everything will be okay. But after 2 years, some of the solutions could be cut off. And even, for example, Elon Musk, he had a different opinion on X regulations. And he said, okay, European market is not so big, so we cut out the European market from accessing X. We still have access to it, but I'm not sure how long and regulators will regulate it. Maybe world will just turn around Europe, and Europe will be as a third sort region where new technologies related to AI will come. I'm not sure. I'm just saying this is my opinion.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I think the European officials really do believe and hope that AI Act will follow the success or the impact GDPR has had on the world. But as the 101 International Economics says, you can reduce your tariffs in your own country, but if the countries around you don't reduce tariffs, you will be the sole loser. And if the global scene changes, then everybody benefits from it. With AI Act and the negative communication around it, if the politicians, policymakers in the US, UK, and other countries do not follow the European path, and it's very likely, then we will certainly have a huge difference between the EU and other countries. The EU expects other countries to follow their footsteps. If they do, we have different scenarios, this is one of them. If they do, then the European Union is the pioneer, and yet everyone is following the same path, and we have the same situation. But in my personal opinion, it's highly unlikely.
And Rokas, how about you? I remember we had to talk about this.
I also think that there was some, not a way competition, but like very close looking from bigger countries who want to participate in the or see the future, but our countries can assist the development of AI, how to regulate this or to regulate if not. And there was some different approaches. Who will be first? Who will take the first steps? We see now that European Union took the approach to regulate, and we are the first. And United States, for example, took a bit different approach with Joe Biden just having some decree or order in the form of recommendations what AI companies should follow. Like totally different approach, I would say. And I would agree that regulation, the amount of regulation, especially for startups, for new technology developers, for smaller companies, It's like a really big and main issue. And we don't need to look far back. For example, with fintech, at the moment, Estonia was very attractive country, but it had becoming with stricter regulations. So the countries were started to move down more. So Lithuania was trying to attract companies in the area by also representing themselves in global market as suitable place for fintech companies. But well, after some times the regulation got stricter, and we see those companies also moving outside. Businesses are now very much mobile. They don't need to be stuck in one country. So they, of course, they check and they evaluate those legal costs, administrative costs, reporting costs, and so on. This is one side for business. But from our side, I'm in a way happy that some regulation, I think, in my view, should be in place, not only in form of recommendations, which relates to the aim to protect human rights, data privacy issues related to that, tracking, surveillance, just that it wouldn't be so open as, for example, like with China, where the AI is used and for government purposes to track, evaluate, classify you. So I think in some ways, yes, but how much of regulation would foster innovation? Of course, smaller for development is better. So this is my view.
We were talking about this. We all know what things like writing, photography, and software are protected by law. But what about AI prompts? And can AI creators use intellectual property laws to protect their work? And can they use their trade secrets or confidentiality agreements to keep their data safe? What should they think about in these cases?
It's a very interesting topic in my view. And again, I would split my answer in several groups. In general, AI takes intellectual property rules. So at first, who owns the products generated by AI? Courts of the United States and Intellectual Property Office of the United States took the clear and straight position that only human being can be the author, the owner of copyright. So only the creations created by human being can be protected by copyright law. And anything what is created by the AI is not protectable. So if you get the results of these from ChatGPT, Midjourney, they are not protected by copyright. A bit different situation is if you are not AI generated, but if you have, for example, AI assist. But it's again, how much of human input should be present? Do you use the AI just as a tool, as for example, photography and Photoshop, or AI generates it? In case of AI assisted, there was one case with comic book, which was awarded a copyright for the simple reason that there was human input in creating entire comic book and its underlying story. But after there was also some controversy because it was after revealed that part of the images in this comic book was created with Midjourney. So IP Office of the United States changed their position, saying that the portion which was created by Midjourney is not protectable by copyright. And similar position we have in the United Kingdom. Supreme Court said that AI cannot be named as a patent inventor, for example. But we have opposite situation in the opposite part of the globe. I read about case in China. The Chinese court said that AI generated image is protected by copyright. So because the person put it so much efforts into prompts, changing, finding the right qualities of that image, so they accepted that it can be protected by copyright. And also similar cases were in Australia, where court said that AI system can be held as an inventor. We understand we had like two very different positions in one part of the world and another. For the moment, it's not clear. It's very interesting time because these cases are appearing before courts. Courts are deciding them. They go to higher courts, and we need some, for example, in the United States, probably the Supreme Court at some stage will tell its final position, how they see AI in relation to copyright. And we can have a situation that, one country it can be protected and another not. Another problem with intellectual property rights, which relates to AI, is who owns the input data. So basically what we talked a bit with.
Training data, you mean, yeah?
with training data, because there is also lots of lawsuits during this year from authors, graphic artists, journalists, publishing house, and the latest is with New York Times suing OpenAI for the use of their data in these big language training models or other models. Authors basically raise the question of consent. Do they consent to that? Do they need to consent to that? And the question of adequate compensation. Because from this publishing house perspective, author's perspective, they see something like AI companies are like a bit free riding on their work, or in a way competing with them without proper compensation to authors in question. And I would say, like, for some, maybe it's more personal issues that author does not like that his creations would be into AI training model. But for some, like New York Times, I think it's just the question of the adequate compensation. Probably they believe in the same future, but it's meant to be AI, but just we want to step in and have some piece of that pie revenues which are generated. And again, and I think it's also not a new issue in general. Same situations was with Google digitalizing books, with internet, with music streaming. There was, we can remember Napster, which was closed because it didn't have licenses. And now it's similar. So it's now just a question, again, where the politics, like IP politics, IP laws or case laws will go. Will we have some exclusion or limitation for AI companies to say it's important technology you can use, but with some limitations? Or will we have the question that, for each use, the license is needed?
Or maybe there will be a separate AI license or AI training license. What could be new model?
Exactly. And this will influence, because under each of these possible options, there is different business scenarios. For example, if you can own for free, or you need lots of legal administration and financial efforts to buy all those licenses, or they are somehow like acceptable as for example, with use of films in some TV station, that you just fill the form, that you use some content and you pay some agreed fees. So it can really differently affect how this technologies develop. And what about prompts? You mentioned how prompts can be protected and if they can be protected.
Yeah.
One aspect depends if prompts can be copyrighted. In my view, some prompts theoretically, and if they meet the criteria for creation from copyright perspective, can be sufficient to be protected under copyright. But in this case, the prompt should be original idea, a result of human creative process and fixed in a tangible medium or expression. But when it comes question, can we, like for each prompt, probably it will not be possible. For like simple question, make me some picture, probably it won't apply because it's just consists of general words. But again, if we even have the protection for prompt itself, it does not mean that we protect the outcome that the AI generates from our creations. We talked about it a bit earlier. What to do with prompts? I think even going that direction, that to copyright the prompt won't, especially for smaller company, probably won't be a good scenario, although it could be possible. So maybe a better way, in my view, would be to just secure prompts from the trade secret, commercial secret perspective, and just try to do it. My recommendations from companies, because the prompts could be in a way hard to copyright, it could be go through this confidentiality, commercial secret provisions. For example, in Lithuania, for that, company would need to have a list of its commercial information. So my recommendation would be to include into that list that prompts and everything which is related to the AI of that company works is confidential information, commercial secret of that company. And then we need employees, of course, to get informed about such document, have them signed into it, and my addition with employees in place. There is also possibility, for example, all this information of a company, like valuable information, is contained like in one or few persons. Also possible to have safeguards that after this persons leave the company, they could have the non-petition provisions applicable to them. But in such case, company needs to pay them for with at least 40% of their salary, such as requirement in Lithuania. If you're operating in different countries, you need to check under those countries' laws just to see what safeguards you have in addition. Same with our tech companies, and I think for AI it's not different. If you want to protect your IP, company IP, so best way is to have it protected with confidentiality. And even with clients, if you don't want the clients to use your information for benefit of others, you can also include a confidentiality provision into that agreement. And with IP in general, it's also worth noting that even if prompts can be regarded as copyright, as a creation which is protected, so without additional agreement, for example, in Lithuania, employee passes the rights to that creation only for 5 years if there is no additional agreement. So for companies normally which operate in the field of IP creation, we need to have additional agreements for that with employees. Each employee would sign, or each subcontractor or the person who used in the project would sign additional agreements for transferring of IP rights to the company.
Thank you, Rokas, for a really detailed explanation. And I believe a lot of companies who currently are in the AI space and developing different solutions, they will benefit from it. Egle, you mentioned what something interesting is building in EU related to supercomputers and huge 20 billion euro per year fund for AI innovations. Can you tell us more about these projects? Who might be benefit from these funds, and how do you think these supercomputers and funds will be used?
I'm not exactly sure about the exact sum, but European Union has been investing over the past 3 to 4 years, I think, in the development of European supercomputers. 3 of the supercomputers are now world class. One is in Italy, one I think it's called Leonardo. The second one is in Finland called Lumi, and the third one being in Barcelona, Mare Nostrum 5. The European Union has been investing in the development of its own supercomputers, thinking and expecting that this will give an edge to the European Union in terms of AI, global AI race. And it probably will. There has been a debate on whether the European Union should buy the technology that is already available in the world and use it for European purposes, or develop it on their own. In this case, the political notion of European digital sovereignty won, and Europeans want to build their own supercomputers rather than buy it from the biggest global companies worldwide. The Commissioner Breton and other officials have announced in November 2023 that some European SMEs, AI startups, will be able to use these supercomputers in the future. The exact call we can include in the link below. Certainly this might become an opportunity for startups and SMEs in Europe.
Okay, so you have that link, you can send me over.
Yep,
so I
sure.
can include. And what do you think, how these funds will be spent? From one side, are these funds will be dedicated to innovations in the AI sector, or bigger part of these funds will be spent on trying to adjust to legal environment of European Union? This is my question. What do you think?
Usually the European funds have very strict rules on where they can be used and not. Probably they won't be able to use it for compliance costs to comply with the AI Act. The question is bigger and very important and very painful, I would say, especially for countries in the Central Eastern Europe. The European Union has a lot of money and funds to promote innovation, be it structural funds in case of CE countries or the new Europe that has joined in 2004, or Horizon 2020, which is one of the biggest opportunities for companies of different size. If we look at the statistics, we see that our companies in Lithuania, for example, are at a disadvantage because participating in this program successfully requires having partners in different European countries. In Lithuania, for example, we do not have people with a significant success story to train our companies and so on and so forth. I will not delve into the ambition our science and other public institutions have in order to promote business participation in Horizon 2020. But this is a big problem. And what I'm going towards is these opportunities with supercomputers, AI promotion, all the innovation promotion tools that will be available for AI companies, SMEs, and startups, whether the countries and the people from Central Eastern Europe, which is smaller, where the opportunities are lower, will be able to use these funds as much as the companies that exist in the West. It's an open question. We'll see. We cannot say too much at the moment, but we have to recognize that both our institutions, agencies have to be preparing for that, because as the time goes by, and if the European Union does not refuse the idea of this big European digital sovereignty, which in my personal opinion is not the right way. We are too small in terms of global race to go alone. We have to collaborate, but at the same time respecting and securing the interests of our markets. Our agencies, our institutions have to be prepared for these new developments in the European realm.
Egle, you already mentioned the different regulatory environment for AI in Europe and in other regions. And Rokas, you also mentioned that. But maybe you can compare some things. For example, what is different in UK or US or Singapore compared to Europe?
Absolutely. Comparing the US, UK, and Singapore to the European Union, for example, we can see that the countries like Singapore and the UK invest a lot in understanding the technology before regulating it. For example, in Singapore, I think they've been working on AI regulatory sandbox for over a year now. They have recommendations. They cooperate with companies. The UK is following the same path. I think it was March 2023 or April, where they published their approach to AI regulation, and they have been working with the companies on the same path. If you look at the website of UK's government when it comes to AI innovation, we can put this link below as well. You will see a link with 50 pages where there's a lot of models explaining how companies of different sizes, startups, SMEs should act. There are different cases explained in a very sort of understandable, humane manner. So they're investing a lot in it. And this, at least for now, looks much more open and innovation promotion like than the European Union's approach. There are other countries which do not talk that much about the regulation. They have China with a lot of states' investment in AI development. We don't know a lot of things. We do know they are issuing some type of regulation. If we looked at Japan, until the discussion on AI Act began in a very heated manner in December, they were claiming they will follow the European path. We'll see how it goes afterwards. But I think in East Asia, it's one of the few countries that have proclaimed that the European way is the way. We have UAE, where they are investing a lot of state money in the development of AI ecosystem, but we do not really hear much about their regulatory measures yet. We have Israel, always open for innovations, one of the spots where both talent, science, and regulatory openness is combined. There are other countries that want to join the AI race, including Canada, the US, and so on and so forth. I noticed in the public domain when comparing different countries, the EU is sometimes compared to the US or Canada as a whole. As far as I know, we're not a federation yet. We have to compare Germany or France to the US or Canada, not the EU itself. If we looked at the EU as a whole, the numbers are not that bad. I think the EU is around number 3 in the world or number 4 in the world in terms of the combination of talent, private startups, finances allocated to AI, and so on and so forth. But we still do not live in a federation. We do not have a unified state, and we should compare other singular countries to other countries.
Thank you, Agla. And Rokas, in your view, what are the potential legal implications for AI solution companies operating under different regulatory environments like in Europe, UK, and US? What do you think?
Like in my view, because I work quite a lot with companies who operate globally, I wouldn't see it as a big change to our businesses, to doing business in our regulated areas. Of course, it's better when we have some harmonized, at least principles. But for example, now, as I mentioned, with copyright, it's very unclear. Part of the world says that AI generated content cannot be copyrighted. Part of the world says that it can, and that it can be protected under copyright. And we have like different approaches to surveillance, scraping of video data by AI. China maybe has one regular approach. Europe, US has different. In some places, there are just recommendations, which means that companies tend to adhere to them, but can take a risk and not to adhere, and then it's regulated. So it's more of administrative burden and legal burden. I don't see much of a big change from other regulated areas where business is doing that. The main thing that if it's regulation, company needs to adhere to it and comply with it. What implications can be that we've touched upon a bit, that companies and startups can, this is where they could start operation or they could develop. Companies can choose the places where they want to be established, they want to have their development works, and then spreading the product around the globe. So in each case, they will need to meet certain requirements in the countries in which we operate. And also, I fully agree with Agla that when we talk about European Union, we don't need to forget that European Union is also made from different countries. Even now we have, for example, if we have some aspects regulated like in whole European Union as GDPR, but for example, with some software issues, consumer rights in regards to software issues. For example, we have Germany with a bit stricter standards and the case law, and we have, for example, Lithuania, which does not even have a law on certain specific IT-related issues. So there is also, it's always this uncertainty. So the answer to the companies or suggestion is to have the markets which you want to enter, consult with lawyer in those markets, have some regulatory table, make your homework, and otherwise it can be costly or even unable to go with your product.
Thank you, Rokas, and thank you, Agla, for joining us today on the AI Master's Voice and sharing your expertise, your knowledge with the audience.
Thank you for having me here, and it was really interesting to hear other perspectives and very legal-oriented perspectives. Time will show whether regulating the innovation brings more benefits than negatives. As a person who wants to see European Union thrive and compete with other regions in terms of technological development, I think we still need to have a very serious conversation on open source versus IP protection and how does that affect innovation potential and business as a whole. So thank you for having me. I will follow your work, and please subscribe, like, and follow us on social media. Looking forward to hearing other thoughts.
Thank you, Agla. And Rokas, your last thoughts?
I also feel very enriched by this discussion we had. Was interesting to hear from more input and detailed information how this regulation of AI is going around the globe. I personally am interested in the IP topics related to AI, how this situation, ownership of AI generate content will go. Will it be harmonized? And also I'm interested also very much how this input training data issue will be solved. Will it be some licensing model?
Right, so it was really interesting discussion, and I believe this topic is so open and we can continue for hours trying to understand and see different application of this EU AI Act and legal environment environment for AI solutions. But I really encourage everyone who was listening until this moment to put your questions and some thoughts in the comment section, so we will review and we will try to answer those questions to you. And thank you for joining us on AI Masters Voice. I encourage you to leave the comments, like our video, share it with your friends, colleagues. It's really important for us because it's the first episode of AI Masters Voice, and your support is really, really needed. So don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to AI Masters YouTube channel for more exciting conversations about the dynamic world of AI. And until the next time, keep innovating and see you soon.